The rain poured down in furious sheets, drumming against the glass walls of the parking garage like an angry heartbeat. Shadows stretched long under the flickering fluorescent lights, broken by the echo of hurried footsteps and the sound of something heavy dragging. In the corner of the dimly lit structure, a woman's desperate voice pierced the air, trembling with fear. "Please, please don't hurt me. I can't walk." Her words cracked, as if every syllable was weighed down by terror. She was clutching her ankle, her expensive heels discarded on the cold cement floor, her sleek black dress torn at the hem. Drops of water slid down her pale face, mixing with tears that she could no longer hold back. For all her power, all her control in boardrooms and behind glass desks, in this moment she was just a woman stripped of every title, vulnerable, cornered, and completely at the mercy of men who smelled weakness, like wolves scenting blood. The woman was Elena Marlowe, a CEO whose name carried weight in every financial circle. To her employees, she was a force of nature, someone who commanded entire markets with the raise of a hand. But none of that mattered now. A man in a hooded jacket stepped closer, his boots grinding on the wet concrete, his shadow spilling over her like a dark tide. His voice was low, menacing. "Doesn't matter if you can walk or not. You've got something we want." Her heart raced as her fingers clawed at the ground, trying to push herself back, but her ankles screamed with pain. She had twisted it when she ran, and now she couldn't even stand. She felt trapped, cornered between concrete pillars and steel rails with nowhere left to run. Elena's mind raced. Was this it? Was this how her story ended? All her life she had fought to be seen as more than just a woman in a world run by men, clawing her way up boardrooms filled with skepticism and doubt. She had endured humiliation, betrayal, endless nights proving herself. And yet here she was, reduced to pleading for her life like a helpless stranger in her own city. Tears blurred her vision as the man raised his hand, something metallic flashing under the harsh light. Her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream, but the sound lodged deep, strangled by terror. And then, a sharp voice broke the tension. "Hey, step away from her!" The words cut through the storm, steady and commanding, filled not with arrogance but with an unshakable resolve. From the other side of the parking garage, a figure emerged. He wasn't dressed in a suit or a uniform. He wasn't armed with anything but a leather jacket, jeans, and the kind of presence that made the air itself pause. His eyes burned with a protective fury, the kind of fire only found in men who have lost much, and vowed never to let someone else suffer the same. Elena blinked through her tears, her chest heaving. For a moment she thought maybe she was hallucinating, her fear inventing a savior. But no, he was real, and he was walking straight toward the danger without hesitation. The men shifted uneasily, muttering under their breath. "Who the hell are you?" one spat. The stranger didn't answer right away. He glanced at Elena, just one glance, and in that look she felt something she had never felt before. Not pity, not judgment, but a fierce, unspoken promise. "You're safe now." And in that split second, even before he moved, even before the fight began, Elena realized something. Her life was about to change forever, but she had no idea who this man was, or what it would cost him to save her. The storm outside raged on, wind howling through the open slats of the garage, but inside, the only sound Elena heard was the steady rhythm of his footsteps. The stranger moved with a quiet confidence, his shoulders squared, his gaze fixed like steel. He wasn't reckless, but he wasn't afraid either. "Last warning," he said, his voice calm but threaded with danger. "Step away." The hooded man sneered, flashing his weapon like a threat, but something in the stranger's tone made him falter. It wasn't bravado, it was certainty. The kind of certainty that comes from someone who has already walked through fire and survived. Elena clutched her ankle tighter, her heart pounding as the world seemed to slow around her. Who was he? Why was he here? His name was Daniel Reed, though no one in the garage knew it yet. Once upon a time, he had been someone else entirely. A decorated firefighter, a man who had run toward burning buildings while others ran away. But that life had ended the night he carried his wife's body out of the wreckage of a collapsed home, her last breath leaving in his arms. From that night forward, Daniel lived not for himself, but for their little girl, Maya, 7 years old with curls as wild as her laugh. She was his entire world now. He had traded the firehouse for construction jobs, the thrill of heroism for the grind of survival. Every dollar he earned went into rent, groceries, and school shoes. Every ounce of strength poured into being both father and mother, to a child who still asked why her mummy wasn't coming back. And yet, despite the weight he carried, Daniel had not lost the part of him that refused to look away when someone was in danger. Some instincts never died. Tonight, he had been on his way home from a late shift, exhausted, his mind already drifting to the peanut butter sandwiches Maya loved and the bedtime story she would be waiting for. But when he heard the muffled cry echoing through the garage, when he saw the flicker of movement in the shadows, he didn't hesitate. He couldn't. Now here he was, standing between a group of predators and a woman who clearly did not belong in this nightmare. He didn't know her name, didn't know her world of power and boardrooms and titles. All he saw was fear in her eyes, the same kind of fear he had once seen in the mirror after losing everything. Leave her. Now. His words cut through the thick air again, and though the men laughed, there was a tremor of unease. Elena stared at him, her breath shallow, torn between gratitude and disbelief. She had built her empire on the foundation of never needing anyone, of standing taller and fighting harder than everyone who doubted her. And yet here she was, utterly powerless, forced to rely on a stranger whose very presence seemed to rewrite the rules of the night. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but he heard it. "Why are you helping me?" Daniel didn't take his eyes off the men, but his reply was steady, almost gentle. "Because you asked." The answer stunned her. Simple, raw, true. The tension thickened as the men closed in, circling like vultures, testing whether the intruder was bluffing. Daniel shifted, ready, his muscles coiled. Elena gripped the concrete beneath her palms, fear and hope warring inside her. She didn't know his story. She didn't know the grief he carried, the daughter waiting for him at home, or the promise he had silently made to never let the darkness win again. But she was about to find out, because tonight, the storm wasn't only outside. It was here in this garage, and it was about to break loose. The air snapped tight like a wire pulled to its breaking point. Elena could taste the metallic tang of fear in her mouth as the hooded man stepped closer, waving the blade like a snake testing its prey. "You've got a big mouth for someone without backup," he sneered at Daniel. His partner chuckled darkly, circling to Elena's other side, cutting off any chance of escape. Daniel didn't flinch. His jaw tightened, his eyes sharp as a blade of their own. He wasn't a man who picked fights, but he was a man who ended them. "Last chance," he said, low and even. "Walk away." But predators don't walk away. They pounce. The first man lunged, arm flashing forward with the knife. Elena's breath stopped in her throat, certain she was about to see blood, but Daniel's movements were a blur. He sidestepped, grabbed the attacker's wrist and twisted. The crack of bone echoed like thunder. The knife clattered across the cement floor, spinning into the shadows. "Ah!" The man's scream bounced off the cold walls, raw with pain. The second man cursed and rushed in, his fist cutting the air toward Daniel's jaw. Daniel ducked low, his shoulder slamming into the attacker's chest, driving him backward into a concrete pillar with a force that rattled the whole garage. The man groaned, slumping but still clawing to stand. Elena's eyes went wide. She had never seen violence up close. Never seen a man fight not with polished words or corporate strategies, but with raw, instinctive power. The boardroom battles she fought daily suddenly seemed like games compared to this. Here, under these flickering lights, it was primal, life or death. But as she tried to steady her trembling breath, reality struck her like a slap. She had no control. Her empire, her money, her name, none of it mattered. Here she was, curled on the floor, clutching a useless ankle while another human being bled and fought on her behalf. Her pride cracked like glass. For years she had trained herself never to show weakness, never to let anyone see her vulnerable. Yet tonight, stripped down to nothing but fear and trembling bones, she felt the humiliation burn inside her. She hated needing him, hated being this helpless. The fight raged on. One of the men, desperate and wild, grabbed a steel rod from the ground and swung at Daniel's head. Elena gasped, her scream slicing the air. "Behind you!" Daniel turned just in time. The rod scraped across his shoulder, ripping through his jacket, and pain flashed across his face. For the first time, Elena saw him falter. Her heart lurched. The attacker grinned, emboldened, lifting the rod again for a killing strike. Elena's instinct screamed, "Do something, anything!" She reached for the discarded heel beside her, her hand trembling. and with a surge of desperation she hurled it. The shoe spun clumsily through the air, but hit the attacker square in the face. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He staggered, his grip faltering. Daniel seized the moment. With a powerful swing, he knocked the rod away and landed a strike that sent the man sprawling across the cement. The echoes of the fall seemed to shake the whole structure. Silence followed, broken only by the ragged breaths of those still standing. Daniel wiped blood from his lip, his chest heaving. Elena's heart hammered, her body frozen between relief and shame. For the first time in her life, the CEO who commanded thousands, who bent markets to her will, had been reduced to someone begging for protection. And she knew humiliation was far from over. Because as the men groaned on the ground, Daniel turned his gaze to her, not unkind, not condemning, but steady and unyielding. "Can you stand?" he asked. Her throat tightened. She shook her head. "I told you. I can't walk." The words once meant to plead for her life now sounded like chains, confessions she had never wanted anyone to hear. And Daniel, bleeding but unbroken, crouched beside her. His next move would not only test his strength, but would forever intertwine his fate with hers. For a moment, the garage was nothing but silence, thick, heavy, alive. The storm outside had softened into steady rainfall, its rhythm echoing faintly through the concrete structure. Elena sat trembling on the cold floor, her ankles screaming, her dress clinging to her skin from the damp night air. Across from her, Daniel leaned forward, his chest rising and falling like a man who had been through wars. And maybe in his own way he had. He knelt down to her level, his voice softer now, almost hesitant. "I'll carry you," her chin snapped up. "No," she whispered, though it came out more fragile than she meant. Elena Marlowe never said no out of weakness, only control. But now the refusal felt hollow, desperate to salvage even a shred of dignity. Daniel studied her, his eyes filled not with pity but with something far more dangerous, understanding. "You can't walk," he said gently, though the firmness of his tone left little room for debate. "And I'm not leaving you here." Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to say that she didn't need him, that she was still in control. But the memory of herself just minutes ago, pleading, begging, powerless, was still raw, carved into her pride like a scar that would never fade. She had always been the one people looked to for strength. Tonight her mask had shattered. Daniel didn't wait for her pride to find words. With a steady movement, he slid one arm beneath her knees and the other around her back. She stiffened instantly, her body rigid against his. "Put me down," she hissed through clenched teeth, but her voice quivered, betraying her. He ignored the protest. She weighed less than he expected, though every ounce of her resistance made the act heavier. Still, he lifted her as if she were something precious, something that could not be dropped. His warmth surrounded her, steady and unyielding, a stark contrast to the icy panic that still clung to her chest. For Elena, humiliation seared deeper with every step he took. To be carried, her, the woman who had built towers of glass and steel with her name etched on the top floors, was unbearable. And yet, against her will, another feeling fought to the surface, gratitude, raw, suffocating gratitude that a stranger had bled for her, shielded her, and now bore her weight without complaint. She turned her face away, hiding the tears threatening to fall. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not this man. Not anyone. But Daniel noticed anyway. He didn't call her out, didn't soften his grip with condescension. He simply carried her steadily toward the light at the edge of the garage, his silence a strange kind of mercy. As they stepped out into the rain, the world felt different. The city noises were muffled by the storm, the distant glow of streetlights bending through the curtain of water. He moved toward his old truck, parked crookedly in the corner, its paint chipped, its engine coughing even when idle. He opened the passenger side carefully, setting her down with a gentleness she hadn't expected. For a moment, their eyes met in the dim glow of the dashboard light. Hers guarded yet trembling, his weary yet steady. Something unspoken hung in the air between them, something that unsettled her more than the attack itself. Trust. "You should call someone," Daniel said, his voice breaking the fragile silence. "Family, friends?" Her lips parted, but the answer stuck in her throat. Who could she call? The men on her board who respected her power but not her heart. The colleagues who saw her as a machine, not a woman. Her parents long gone, buried beneath expectations she had long outlived. She had no one. Not really. Her silence stretched, and Daniel understood more than she wanted him to. He started the truck instead, the engine sputtering alive. Elena stared at him, her pride waging war with something new, something she couldn't name. She wanted to ask him why he had done it, why he had risked himself for a stranger. But instead, she bit back the words and clenched her fists, because the truth scared her more than the knife ever had, and as the rain blurred the windshield, she realized she wasn't done with him. Not yet. The rain drummed against the roof of the truck, steady and relentless, as Daniel drove through the dim streets. The wipers screeched back and forth, clearing away streaks of water only for them to be replaced again. Inside, silence pressed between them, heavy, suffocating. Elena sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her ankle throbbing, her mind whirling in circles. She should have been calling her driver, her security team, anyone. But she hadn't. Instead, she was here, in the battered seat of a stranger's old truck, surrounded by the faint smell of leather and engine oil. With a man who had already seen her more vulnerable than anyone ever had, she hated it. And yet, she couldn't deny the strange sense of safety that wrapped around her in the quiet hum of his presence. Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel firmly, his knuckles scarred, his jacket torn from the fight. His jaw was set, eyes fixed on the road, but she noticed the faint wince when he shifted his injured shoulder. He wasn't invincible. He had taken blows for her. Finally, she broke the silence. Her voice was softer than she meant it to be. "You didn't have to do that." He glanced at her briefly, then back at the road. "I did. Why?" She pressed, the edge in her voice sharpening, as if anger could mask the vulnerability she felt. "You don't know me. You don't know who I am, what I've done. Why risk yourself?" For a long moment he didn't answer. The truck rattled as it hit a pothole, water splashing up against the sides. Then his voice came low, steady. "Because once, someone risked everything for me. And I couldn't save them." Elena turned her head sharply. His profile was lit by the glow of passing streetlights, strong, worn, haunted. She wanted to ask more, but something in the gravity of his tone stopped her. They rode in silence again until the truck pulled to a stop at a red light. The rain painted the windshield in shimmering streaks, and Daniel finally exhaled, almost as if surrendering something he'd been holding for years. "My wife," he said quietly. "She died 3 years ago. Fire." Eleanor's chest tightened. The bluntness of his confession, so raw, so unpolished, cut deeper than any carefully phrased corporate story she'd ever heard. He went on, his voice barely audible over the rain. "I was a firefighter. I used to think I could save everyone. That night, I couldn't save her. But I saved our daughter. And since then—" His jaw clenched, his knuckles whitening on the wheel. "I promised myself I'd never stand by while someone was in danger. Not ever again." The weight of his words fell heavy in the cab. Elena's throat burned. She wanted to respond, but no words came. All her life, she had defined herself by control, by never depending on anyone. Yet this man, this stranger, had built his entire existence on carrying others, even at the cost of his own scars. She swallowed hard. "You have a daughter?" For the first time, a flicker of warmth touched his face. "Maya 7, she's—" Everything. Elena's chest twisted. She pictured him, after nights like this, going home to a little girl waiting in pajamas, unaware of the battles her father fought in the shadows. The thought disarmed her more than anything else could, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she whispered, "She's lucky to have you." The words hung in the air, fragile but true. Daniel gave a small, almost reluctant smile before focusing back on the road, but Elena felt it, that subtle, seismic shift. The man she had dismissed as just a stranger in a parking garage was no longer just that. He was a father, a widower, a man who carried his own unbearable losses but still chose to fight for others. And somewhere deep inside, Eleanor knew this night wasn't just survival. It was the beginning of something she could neither predict nor control. The red light turned green. The truck lurched forward, and Elena's phone buzzed in her bag, her world of wealth and power calling her back. But when she saw the name flashing on the screen, her heart sank. The board chairman, a man who, tomorrow morning, would stand in front of hundreds and question her leadership, her strength, her very right to sit in the chair she had built her life around. Her hands trembled as she ignored the call. Because right now, for the first time in years, Elena Marlowe wasn't the CEO. She was just a woman sitting beside a man whose truth had cracked something open inside her. By the time Daniel pulled up in front of Elena's penthouse building, the storm had quieted into a drizzle. The towering skyscraper loomed above them, glowing like a monument to everything Elena had built: power, money, reputation. The kind of fortress that screamed untouchable. Daniel killed the engine and stepped out, circling around to open her door. She hesitated, staring up at the glittering tower, suddenly aware of how fractured she felt inside. The woman who usually walked into this building with her chin high and stride unshaken now sat frozen, ankle-bound in pain, her pride clinging to scraps. "Let me help you," Daniel said simply. Her first instinct was to snap at him, to remind him that she didn't need anyone. But when she tried to stand, her ankle gave way and she gasped, grabbing the truck door for balance. The humiliation was sharp, but so was the truth. She couldn't do this alone. Without another word, Daniel slid an arm under hers and lifted her weight again. She stiffened, glaring at him, but the strength in his grip was undeniable. He carried her through the grand lobby, the marble floors gleaming beneath their feet, the receptionist's eyes widening as she took in the sight. Elena wanted to disappear into the floor. As the elevator doors closed behind them, Elena finally broke. "You don't understand," she hissed, her voice trembling with anger more at herself than at him. "I can't let them see me like this. Tomorrow I have a board meeting. They already doubt me, waiting for me to fail, waiting for proof that I can't handle this job because I'm a woman. If I walk in on crutches, if I look weak, it's over." Daniel studied her, his expression unreadable. "So you'd rather bleed alone than accept help?" His words stung because they were true. She turned away, staring at her reflection in the mirrored walls of the elevator. The woman staring back didn't look like the CEO of Marlowe Enterprises. She looked like someone fragile, someone scared. And she hated it. When the elevator dinged open, a familiar voice called out from the hallway. "Eleanor?" It was Victor Hensley, the board chairman. Tall, silver-haired and calculating, he was a man who smiled with his mouth but not his eyes. He stepped closer, his gaze flicking from Elena to Daniel with thinly veiled suspicion. "My God," he said smoothly, though the edge in his tone was unmistakable. "What happened to you?" Elena's stomach sank. This was the last person she wanted to see her like this, bruised, limping, held up by a man who looked as though he belonged more on a construction site than in her pristine world. "I'm fine," Elena said quickly, her voice sharp, defensive. "Just an accident." Victor arched a brow, his eyes narrowing on Daniel. "And who is this Good Samaritan?" Before Elena could answer, Daniel's hand tightened protectively at her side. "The one who made sure she got home safe," the words hung in the hallway, bold and unapologetic. For a split second, Elena thought Victor might sneer, dismiss Daniel as beneath their world. But what terrified her wasn't Victor's smirk. It was the sudden rush of warmth she felt at Daniel's defense. Victor's lips curved into a cold smile. "Interesting company you keep, Elena. I'll see you tomorrow. Don't be late. The board is eager to hear from you." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving his warning sharp as glass in the air. The moment the door to her penthouse closed behind them, Elena pulled free from Daniel's arm and rounded on him, her chest heaving. "You don't get it!" she snapped, tears threatening to spill. "I don't know what it's like to be watched, judged, waiting for one crack in the armor. You don't know what it's like to fight your entire life to be taken seriously, and then in one night, have it all nearly ripped away." Daniel didn't move. He didn't flinch at her anger. Instead, his voice came low, steady, and cutting through her rage. "You think I don't know what it's like to fight for respect? To walk into rooms where no one believes in you? To be measured by losses you couldn't control?" She froze, the weight of his words slamming into her. He stepped closer, his gaze burning into hers. "The difference between us is, you're afraid needing help makes you weak. I know it doesn't." Her breath caught. For the first time, she couldn't look away, because deep down she knew he was right. The silence between them was thick, charged, until a knock at the door startled them both. Elena turned, heart pounding, as the muffled voice came through. "Elena, it's urgent. We need to talk about tomorrow's vote." Her blood ran cold. The board wasn't just doubting her. They were planning to take everything. And Daniel, standing in the middle of her penthouse, had just become the one person who could keep her from shattering completely. The knock grew sharper, more insistent. Elena's pulse thundered in her ears as she limped toward the door, Daniel close behind. She opened it to find two of her senior board members, faces she had known for years, men who had shaken her hand in public but whispered doubts in private. "Elena," one of them said, his tone falsely concerned, "we've heard about your incident tonight. Victor called us. He's pushing for a vote tomorrow to reconsider your position." The words landed like a dagger. Elena's stomach twisted. Victor had seen her weakness, and now he was circling like a vulture. "We're not saying you should step down," the other man added smoothly, "but perhaps, for the stability of the company, it would be best if you considered a leave. Time to recover, to gather yourself." Gather yourself. The phrase stung. As if she were nothing more than a fragile figurehead, Elena's jaw tightened, but before she could answer, Daniel's hand touched her shoulder, steadying, grounding. She looked at him, startled by the fire in his eyes. He spoke before she could. "You didn't see what I saw tonight." She didn't crumble. She didn't give up. She fought even when she couldn't stand. "You want strength? That's what it looks like." The board members blinked, taken aback, their eyes narrowing as though Daniel's presence itself was offensive. "And you are—" Daniel didn't flinch. "The man who watched her survive something most of you couldn't even imagine." The silence that followed was tense, the rain outside tapping against the glass like impatient fingers. Elena felt a rush of heat flood her chest. Not humiliation this time, but something fiercer, pride. Not in herself alone, but in the man standing beside her, unafraid to speak when she had been ready to shrink. "Gentlemen," she said finally, her voice steadier than it had been in hours, "you can tell Victor I'll be at that meeting tomorrow. With my head high, if anyone wants to test whether I'm strong enough to lead, they can look me in the eye and try." The men exchanged wary glances, then excused themselves, masks of politeness barely hiding their disappointment. The door shut, and the tension in the penthouse broke like glass shattering. Elena slumped against the wall, her ankle throbbing, but her heart alive with fire. She turned to Daniel, her eyes burning. "Why did you do that?" He shrugged, though his voice was thick with conviction. "Because you don't need saving. You just needed reminding." Her throat closed, a tear slipping free despite her will. She tried to speak, but found herself speechless, staring at this man who had stepped out of nowhere, and yet seemed to see her more clearly than anyone in her entire life. Daniel moved toward the door. "You'll be all right," he said quietly. "You don't need me here." But Elena's voice caught him before he could leave. "Oh, you're wrong." He turned, his brow furrowing. She drew a shaky breath. "I don't need you to fight my battles. But tonight I realized I don't want to keep fighting them alone." The words surprised even her, tumbling out raw and unpolished, but true. Daniel stood frozen, his own walls cracking at the edges. For 3 years, he had carried his grief like armor, living only for Maya, never imagining anyone could break through the silence he had wrapped around himself. For the first time, he let himself meet her gaze fully. And in it, he didn't see the untouchable CEO or the broken woman on the parking garage floor. He saw both, the strength and the fragility, the power and the humanity. And Elena saw him, not just the protector but the father, the widower. The man still brave enough to step into fire when others fled. The room was quiet, but the storm inside them both had shifted. Something new had been born in the wreckage of fear, a bond forged in pain, trust, and the courage of a single night. The next morning, Elena Marlowe walked into the boardroom on crutches, head held high. Gasps rippled across the room, whispers circling like vultures. But when Victor sneered, ready to strike, Elena cut him down with a single sentence. "Yes, I was attacked. Yes, I was hurt. But I am still here. And if anyone believes that pain makes me less capable, less worthy, then you've underestimated the very thing that makes me who I am. I don't break." I rise. The room fell silent. Even Victor's smirk faltered. And in the back of her mind, she felt Daniel's voice echo, "You just needed reminding." When the meeting ended, when her position stood unshaken, Elena stepped out into the daylight. Daniel was waiting by his truck, Maya peeking out the window with a shy wave. For the first time in years, Elena smiled. Not the practiced corporate smile, but something real. A split-second act of bravery had changed everything. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one truth had been carved into both their lives forever. Strength isn't found in never needing anyone. It's found in knowing when to let someone stand beside you,